when you're...
sit here for now and
Sure.
or whatever.
I guess it doesn't, yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to be low enough that that's not in your head, on your face? Oh,
Oh,
okay,
it's
that's
not
good.
mine, it's mine.
Okay, yeah. Hello. Hello, Vicki. How are you? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Ready to get started. Glad to see Heartland President Joe Bast is here. He always likes it when I mention that he's here, so you can wave and applaud. And also one of our founding board members, Jim Johnson, and his lovely wife, Tina, are also here with us tonight, so thanks for being here. Yay. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Heartland Institute, and thank you all for being here tonight and everybody watching online as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Heartland, so I see some new faces in here. We were founded in 1984 in the city of Chicago by a group of individuals led by our founder, David Padden, who met regularly to discuss the value of free markets and individual liberty and the need to promote those ideas to the general public, not from Washington, D.C., where there were already a lot of groups doing that, but to an audience and to people right here in the Heartland, especially among the many states across the country. We're a national think tank, and we specialize in making changes happen state by state. And our mission since that founding has been to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems, to fight for policies that shrink the scope and the power of government and increase individual liberty, such as the right to vape in public, rather than submit to mindless policies that treat harmless secondhand vapor as if it were a dangerous product and dangerous to society. And that's why we're all very excited. Heartland's been talking about vaping for quite a while, and that's why we're all very excited about the program we have for you tonight here in the lovely Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center. If you like what you see tonight, whether here in person or watching online, we encourage you to check or look around heartland.org, our website. You can check out our blog, The Freedom Pub, where one of our presenters tonight is published quite often. You can check out our daily podcasts on iTunes, which was listened to 1.3 million times in the last 12 months. You can check out our YouTube page, where this presentation and everyone that we have here in the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center is instantly archived. So if you missed it, there's no excuse for you not to look at it later. And look around. I think you're going to see a lot that's to your liking. You can talk to a Heartland staffer here tonight if you have books that you'd like to donate to the Michael Perry Mazer Memorial Library, which is the best book on free markets and economics and liberty, I think, anywhere in the Midwest. And if you have books at home that you'd like to donate, we'd love to talk to you about that. And if advancing freedom is important to you, as it is to us, I hope you will join the Heartland Institute in our mission. We'd love to have your support so we can keep informing the public and our elected officials about the benefits of free markets and the importance of protecting our liberty. And if you really want to turn heads at the gym or at your kid's basketball game or even at the mall, you can get one of our Heroes of Liberty t-shirts, which are over here, and they're only $10. It'll be t-shirt weather again any day now, so stock up and get some new things for your dresser. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers, who are going to be talking about vaping and how government regulation can kill innovation. Our first presenter is Dr. Brad Radu. He is a professor of medicine at the University of Louisville, where he holds the endowed chair in tobacco harm reduction research at the university's James Graham Brown Cancer Center. He is also a senior fellow here at the Heartland Institute. Radu's research focuses on the substitution of safer tobacco products by smokers who are unable or unwilling to quit smoking with conventional cessation methods because of their addiction to nicotine. His research in comparative epidemiology established the scientific foundation for harm reduction, and he continues to study clinical and social interventions aimed at harm reduction. Radu has published a book summarizing his research, as well as several book chapters and more than 150 articles and abstracts in peer-reviewed journals. He's also the co-author of a brand new Heartland Institute booklet titled Vaping, E-cigarettes, and Public Policy Towards Alternatives to Smoking, and you can find this and download it for free right there at heartland.org. And our second presenter is a longtime friend of the Heartland Institute, Pamela Gorman. She's the executive director of SFATA, the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association. She also founded U.S. Vapor Incorporated, a firm providing public affairs counseling to small business owners and advocacy nonprofit organizations working in the vapor industry. And prior to that, she was Director of Government Relations for Enjoy Incorporated, where she built the first government affairs department and program for an independent, not tobacco-owned manufacturer. And Gorman is also a former state representative and state senator of the great state of Arizona. How about a round of applause to welcome both of our speakers? And Dr. Radu is going to speak, and then Pamela is going to speak with a presentation, and then they're going to sit here for Q&A, and we're looking forward to that. So, Dr. Radu.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight. The Heartland Institute has supported tobacco harm reduction for the past 10 years or so. I started in tobacco harm reduction back in the mid-1990s, and I'm really proud to be a fellow here because this is in essence a market-based solution to cigarette smoking and the devastating toll that smoking takes on Americans. And so I'm delighted to be here. I'm happy for Heartland's support. It's a top-notch booklet. Please take it home and spread the word. So I was trained as a dentist originally, and then I went into pathology. And my specialty is diseases of the mouth and the head and neck area. And I've spent my career in academic medical centers, Emory University, University of Alabama, Birmingham, and now the University of Louisville, where I've seen for many, many decades patients come in with illnesses directly related to smoking. And so in the mid-1990s, I discovered that what I had been told about a possible substitute for cigarettes, that is smokeless tobacco products, what I had been told was completely wrong. I, as an expert, had been misinformed. And so I started to conduct research and ended up devising a program trying to get people converted to smoke-free tobacco products to maintain their nicotine and tobacco satisfaction. And so that's what got me started. And then more recently, in the past 5 years or so, we've seen the same kind of campaign against substitute products being waged against e-cigarettes. And that's brought me into the cigarette debates. And so what I wanted to do is give you a primer on these products tonight and basically answer any questions you might have about them. This is something you won't be reading in the mainstream media because it's been very, very negative. You know, our federal government wants a tobacco-free society. You can Google that. And that's just basically another word for prohibition. And tobacco harm reduction, by its nature, is completely counter to that. It uses the market to help people lead longer and healthier lives. So we'll go through this. I'm going to go through these slides very quickly, but give you a kind of a summary, an overview of what's happening in this field. Now, the American anti-smoking campaign is over 50 years old. It's been going on since the 1964 Surgeon General's report. And according to the CDC, we still have 38 or 40 million smokers in the United States, and 480,000 of them are dying each and every year from smoking-related illnesses. So we've still got a big problem. In the next 20 years, if we just continue on with the same things we've been doing, that's 9.6 million Americans. They're going to die, and every one of them in the next 20 years is today an adult over the age of 35. We're not talking about kids here. I'm going to talk about kids in a little bit, but we're not talking about kids when we talk about the problem of smoking. Now, the only message we hear is quit smoking, quit everything, or take your chances. And we call that quit or die for short. And the only thing we have for people is either behavioral tips, behavioral tricks to help people quit, or nicotine medicines and some other drugs. Now, this is an example from 1993 about how doctors are supposed to help their patients quit smoking. This was from the National Cancer Institute. These are actual tips in quotes. Keep your hands busy, doodle, knit, type a letter. Cut a drinking straw and then pretend that you're smoking a cigarette. And my favorite, and probably yours about this time of the evening, keep a daydream ready to go. Now, people have been saying to me, Brad, this is old stuff. You got to bring this up to date. Well, okay, I will. So in 2015, the National Cancer Institute came out with a whole bunch of other tips that you can read here. Take a time out. Take a walk, play a game, read a good book. Okay, when you're desperate for a cigarette and it's a powerful addiction, these things are going to help? I don't think so. You know, and my wife's favorite, bless her heart, when I start to talk about tobacco issues, get out of the house when you can. Okay? We cannot solve one of the biggest problems in the United States with coping tips. It doesn't work that way. Now, nicotine medicines are also used, and that's all the government will tell you that you can use to quit smoking. They're a temporary bridge to total abstinence. They're fairly expensive. They're very low dose. They're not meant to satisfy. They're meant to give people a bridge to quitting altogether. And for all of those reasons, population studies show that they have a 7% success rate at the population level. And that was called in one review, efficacious and modest. Now I want you to tell me, name another drug the FDA regulates that has a 7% success rate and they call it a success. There aren't any. Okay? We don't tolerate that kind of success rate, and yet that's the only thing our government tells us to use to quit smoking. So we have some other options. Now, I do want to mention nicotine. Nicotine is the reason people smoke. It is an addictive drug. But it's no more dangerous to use nicotine than it is my favorite drug, caffeine. Okay? Both of them are pleasurable. They enhance concentration, performance. They give us a sense of well-being. They elevate our mood. They don't intoxicate us. They're addictive. We can use them long-term because they're not linked to any disease. They don't drive diseases. Nicotine doesn't cause any of the diseases that kill smokers. And just like we consume caffeine in cola drinks and coffee and tea, we can consume nicotine safely if we get it away from the smoky, dirty delivery system. And that's what e-cigarettes do. They create a vapor containing nicotine, but with none of the smoke, none of the bad stuff. So we have nicotine, we have water, we have propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin. Did you ever go to a rock concert? Or a theatrical production and you see artificial smoke? That's propylene glycol. It's been used for decades, and there are long-term studies in animals. It doesn't seem to have any ill effects. And that's what's used to create the vapor for e-cigarettes. Both of those products are generally recognized as safe by the FDA. There are flavors, small amounts of flavors. And yes, it's a natural product. Nicotine comes from a plant. So there are very, very small levels of contaminants. Contaminants are in every product we consume. And so we have to deal with those, but they're not causing major issues. It's far cleaner than smoke with its tens of thousands of chemicals. So now we have this campaign against e-cigarettes. And there are various aspects to the campaign. People say they're loaded with toxins. They say they're poisoning our children. They're a gateway to teen smoking. Kids will start using them and continue and then go on to cigarettes. They don't help smokers quit, and we have to have indoor bans. Those are the things that are claimed, and what I want to do is examine a few of these tonight and let you know that there's a different story. Now here's the headlines on one exaggerated claim, including formaldehyde. Oh my God, when you say formaldehyde, you're supposed to quiver with fear, okay? I'm a pathologist. I handled formaldehyde every day in my career because that's what we fix tissues in. It's not something you want to consume, but I can tell you this, it's not the devil agent that everybody says it is. Okay, it's it's a very, very subtle irritant intoxicant. And it's nothing like what you see in the headlines. Now, there was a research project published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, I'm sure everybody here recognizes the New England Journal is a very high-profile, high-quality medical journal. And basically what they did is they operated e-cigarettes normally, and they created no formaldehyde, okay? And people used that vapor to quit smoking. Then they changed the voltage on the e-cigarette. They cranked the voltage up, and they found what they called hidden formaldehyde. Well, it wasn't hidden because they found it. But it turns out when you crank the voltage up, you create a vapor that doesn't taste good at all. In fact, you can't inhale it. It's sort of like burning toast. Okay? If you use a regular toaster and create toast, it's fine, and you can eat it. But if you burn it, okay, that's going to have a lot of carcinogens in it, that burnt piece of toast. But you don't want to eat it. And that's exactly what they did with these e-cigarettes to create the illusion that they're full of toxins. Formaldehyde actually is everywhere. It's in your body right now. It's produced by plants, animals, and everybody. In fact, it's in some of the fruits we eat. It's in a lot of the products we consume. And it's even in the air. It's in the air in very, very small levels. Now, I can tell you this, that e-cigarette use generally produces no additional formaldehyde, but smoking does. Smoking does deliver extra formaldehyde that people have to deal with. So we're definitely moving, we're moving the right direction when we switch to a vape product. Now, e-cigarettes are poisoning our children. That's made headlines over and over again. Well, it turns out that, you know, there are about 500,000 episodes of poisoning reported to poison control centers throughout the country every year. Now, I should define what a report is. A report is when a parent or a relative or a friend calls up and says, I think my kid just ate something or drank something or maybe got exposed to something. That's what a report is, okay? And yes, there were a few e-cigarettes, 2,500 cases of somebody that was exposed to an e-cigarette. But, ladies, look in your pocketbooks. Men, look up on the counter in your bathroom, because cosmetics and personal care products were responsible for about a quarter of those cases. Household cleaners, another 20%. Foreign bodies, plants. Kids are exposed to lots of things. And tobacco products are actually way down on the list of toxins that kids can be exposed to. Just above alcohol, which there was obviously some things reported there as well. So they're also a gateway to teen smoking. We're going to create a whole generation of teen smokers, okay? However, when you actually look at the data, teen smoking is coming down at an unprecedented pace. This is data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, one of the most respected surveys in the country. And it turns out, when you look at the two blue, when you look at the blue bars, they're coming way down from 2011 to 2015, both in high school kids and in middle school kids. The blue bars are coming down. You can notice here, though, that the light blue bars are e-cigarettes. They're going up. E-cigarettes are being experimented with by children. There's no doubt about that. But it is not impeding the sharp decline in cigarette smoking. And in fact, you could argue with this data that it may be helping it by being something else they experiment with instead of deadly cigarettes. Now, I'm not promoting that in any way, but I just want to show you data that doesn't show that we're creating a new generation of smokers. Now, this is another survey that shows multiple use by children, okay? And this is high school seniors now. And we can see the graph, oops, excuse me. We can see the graph for cigarettes declining at a substantial pace. That's the black line. You know, if we're going to worry about things, we need to worry about alcohol. Because alcohol is still fairly high, although it is also declining. And in fact, about 20% of kids have been drunk. High school seniors have been drunk in the last month. So we do have to worry about other things besides cigarettes and e-cigarettes. In fact, you know, it's often said, and I'm not an industry defender, don't get me wrong, but it's often said that the only reason kids start is because of the industry, okay? That's always the challenge. Well, as a scientist, I try to prove or disprove things. And when I look at this, when I look at this blue line, marijuana, that's now above 20%, I ask, what industry is that? Okay? There is no industry for marijuana except in California and Colorado. But, or sorry, Oregon. Is it Oregon? It's Oregon and Colorado. Okay, well, but there is no industry. Children aren't starting things because companies are selling them. Children are starting things because they experiment. And we have to accept that, and we have to try to guide children to do the right thing. Now, they're also renormalizing smoking. When you use an e-cigarette, it looks like smoking, but we're not normalizing smoking. In fact, smoking, the dark blue bars, are coming down during the era of e-cigarettes faster than it came down before the era of e-cigarettes. And I noticed people taking pictures of the slides. Heartland, I'm happy to have you do that, but Heartland is welcome to share my presentation after the talk. The fact is, smokers have quit with e-cigarettes. There's been a number of clinical trials that have shown, there have been a number of clinical trials that have shown that e-cigarettes have helped smokers quit. There's also this idea that we always have to do clinical trials, okay? That's a big problem because consumer trials are meant to measure treatments for diseases, okay? A doctor wants to have control of everything except the treatment so he or she can determine if a treatment works or not. For consumer behaviors, clinical trials are the wrong model. And the FDA wants to put e-cigarettes in the same model as clinical trials. It's sort of like saying, you know, do you think Coca-Cola could replace coffee in the morning? Okay, sure it could. In the South, people drink Coke. In fact, there's a saying, it's not just for breakfast anymore. Down south when I lived in Birmingham, Alabama. So we have to get away from a model that the FDA judges drugs by in order to judge tobacco products and help consumers make good decisions. In England, e-cigarettes are being accepted. Government agencies there are accepting them. They're saying they're vastly safer than smoking. They're saying they'll help smokers quit. They're encouraging smokers to switch to e-cigarettes. It's really working in England. In fact, the Royal College of Physicians, one of the oldest and most prestigious medical societies, has actually endorsed this concept. So we're really getting momentum there. Here, the FDA, the CDC, and the National Institutes of Health say there's no evidence that help people quit. There's evidence that they're hazardous. There's evidence they cause kids to start, and all of the bad things that we've talked about so far in the lecture. So we have this different concept of e-cigs, and that's why in the United States, most Americans think e-cigarettes are either equally or more harmful than smoking. And it's fewer in the UK, where they have a better perception of what these products can achieve. Well, when smokers switch, everybody wins except people who are adamant about tobacco prohibition. And I think that we need to get a momentum going that gives people the right information. And so we need to promote e-cigarettes and other smoke-free alternatives for smokers. I conducted the first ever clinical community-wide quit smoking program in Owensboro, Kentucky a few years ago, and that was our theme: dump the smoke, but keep on loving the nicotine. And that campaign was endorsed by my university and by my cancer center. That's the end of my talk. I have a variety of places you can go for smokers only: my Tobacco Truth blog, the Heartland Institute Vaping booklet now, and Switch and Quit Owensboro. Thank you very much, and turn it over to Pamela.
Hello. I have to tell you two things. One, this is the first day I've spoken in 10 days because I had laryngitis, so don't be alarmed if I suddenly dip and disappear and a man comes in my place. That's Brian Foydick. He's going to finish today if I'm unable. The second thing I want you to know is there is nothing more, a bigger honor and also more intimidating than to follow this man right here. Dr. Radu is fantastic, and I've had the pleasure for about 6 years now of collaborating and working alongside him on some of these same issues, and it's always exciting to see what he's going to come up with next. So you heard my bio. I have a background in public policy that extends from making public policy to then advocating for good public policy, and I'm very fortunate because I work on tobacco harm reduction issues since I left lawmaking. I've been able to stay in a realm that makes me comfortable, which is fighting for free market principles for American industry. And not everybody who works in government affairs gets to do that, so I feel very honored. But when I first came in working on the vapor issues, I was very impressed and moved and fascinated by, it was probably the only example I had ever seen in my lifetime of the free market actually being allowed to work. And you saw the growth. I mean, I know we have companies sitting here that have grown exponentially because the government kind of didn't know they were out there. They just were appealing to consumers who had been looking for this answer. They had the information they needed to make good choices because, believe it or not, the science out there actually says these products are a really good choice over cigarettes, as you've heard from Dr. Radu here today. So when consumers have the right information, the price is right, and the accessibility is there, they were able to get them online and then pretty soon in shops like we have represented here. People were flocking by the thousands. I mean, the growth, they say now, is about 9 million Americans have just chosen to put down their cigarettes that were killing them and pick up these products with no government subsidy, no freebie through their insurance company, no nanny state laws that made it so it was the only option they had. This is what consumers choose when you let the free market work. And I'm going to get off my box and tell you what I really came here. So I was assigned to talk to you about the urgency with what's going on, and it speaks to what I just excited you about, which is that the free market is solving a public health problem that public health has never been able to solve. With all of the policies they had trying to limit the rights of Americans to live the way they choose, take their own risks they choose to take, there was still 44 million Americans smoking, half of which they claim will die as a result of their smoking. That's what the government says. So along comes an innovative electronic product that is not only acceptable, but it's preferable, and people, for a variety of reasons, are just choosing it over cigarettes. You would think a government that claims to represent a free people would embrace this, encourage it, possibly subsidize it, because that's what they do. Instead, what they've done, and it's been building and building every year, more and more at the state, local, and federal level. But what they've done instead is decide to put us over in this category with combustible tobacco products that, you know, we all know will make you sick if you choose to use it. It's up to you. They're trying to regulate us the same, tax us the same. They're creating a prohibition-style law now at the federal law that is really what I want to focus on with you today because we need your help. I don't know if you smoke or if you know somebody who does, or maybe you had a loved one that passed away from smoking. These products save lives. I'm going to wait on a limb because you know what? One of the things government says I'm not allowed to do is to tell you that. I can't tell you that switching to these products will save your life. They actually have now, through FDA rules, enhanced the previous regulation and added to the fact that I can't even really hand you that document for Dr. Radu, because that will have the truth about the science and that switching to these products instead of smoking could save your life. I can't legally hand that to you if I'm a company in America. That's the America you live in. And we need people who care about the free market and care about freedom and care about First Amendment rights and care about all these things that may not be specific to vapor. But when you see what's happening in this industry, I need you to care, because somebody you love or care about someday will need or want access to these products. And I'm telling you, if we don't do something, and quick, they will not have access. The industry here in America will be gone by next year under the current regulations. And I know it's hard to get your head around. So think about something you do like, that you do is, let's go with butter. Everybody loves butter. This is the Midwest. Do you remember when there's all the hula about some country that was short on butter and it was like a crisis in the nation? Well, imagine if the government said, okay, in order for butter to stay on the market, we're going to need you to submit a bunch of studies and toxicology as well as human studies. And these studies take about 8 years to do, but we need you to do them in 2 years or you're out of business. If you can't get us 8-year studies in 2 years, I'm sorry, butter manufacturers, but you're gone. People are going to have to go back to using lard or whatever they were using before the miracle of butter came along. I mean, it's a far-fetched, but it's really not, because butter, like vapor products, for people like myself that have switched and used them, are a regular part of every day of my life. I put aside my own cigarettes in 2013 and have never picked one back up again. Thank you. I can't take the credit. Some wonderful manufacturer made waffle-flavored vapor. Who doesn't love waffles? I was hooked. Yeah, I actually am what you call an accidental quitter, because I actually kind of switched because I went to work for an e-cigarette company and I didn't want to be that smoker that works there. And so I said, I can't be jumping out to have a cigarette anymore. I'm going to just try these for them. But you know what? Once it came in the mail, because back then there were no stores, when it came in the mail, I filled it up and fired it up, and I said, oh my gosh, this tastes, I don't eat waffles anymore. I said, this is amazing. And then I, moved on to other foods that I don't eat, and discovered after about 2 weeks that my half a pack of cigarettes that was sitting in my go bag for when I go outside to smoke, I had not even touched them. I just threw them away. I didn't have a desire. The idea of turning back is really, really unappealing to people once they switch. It's unappealing as it is for non-smokers to smoke. And that's why the crisis of what's going on is such a big problem for consumers. You see, 9 million Americans have done what I did. They don't want to go back. But as Dr. Radu pointed out, a lot of us really like nicotine. It does some good things for us. We don't want to stop having access to it, so we will go get it. And the place we'll go get it is possibly back to cigarettes. That's my fear. So basically the government, by forcing these products off the market, is basically kind of giving a death order, if you will, to half of those 9 million people if they were all go back to cigarettes. It's really not the proper role of government, is it? The other thing that is striking to me is that if you can't stomach the idea of going back to cigarettes, although you probably will because it's easy, they're everywhere, you'll go to the black market. That worked great in Prohibition, didn't it? I mean, we're in Chicago. We know all about that, right? So let's create a black market and get organized crime selling vapor. That's awesome, government. Good job. The other place they could get it because of modern technology is from foreign sellers on the internet, where you will have no assurance of the quality, no recourse if you get sick or the thing blows up in your hand. Basically, the government will have forced honest, hardworking Americans who are doing nothing but making a better health choice for themselves into this dangerous, no quality control and no recourse marketplace, or dealing with mobsters, which is always an option I wouldn't consider. So those are the options if we don't do something. So here's what the deal is. We've got this, and it's very complicated, so I tried really hard to simplify this and not make it too boring and detailed. So there was this law that Congress passed, and it was called the 2009 Family Smoking Health Children Are Great, blah, blah, blah. We call it the Tobacco Control Act of 2009. Well, you know what's what they do. It's hilarious. So here we go. They passed this law. It was designed to deal with cigarettes and smokeless tobacco, created a regulatory scheme, blah, blah, blah. They said to the folks at the time, hey, if you already have stuff on the market, just register with us, tell us what's in your products, we're all good. But if you want to bring anything new to market after 2007, we're going to need you to jump through like a series of hoops that are burning with fire, and at the end is the pool of doom that's filled with sharks. Basically, they were setting up a system where no new products would come to market. So when the FDA decided that our products needed some regulation, and they felt no other recourse except to go back to this law that was created for cigarettes, they, quote, deemed our products overnight at the hand of bureaucrats that are unelected. Our products, can you hand me that? Our products became tobacco. Now, you may look at this and not see an agricultural product that would burn up into flames if I put a match to it, but apparently that's what our geniuses at the FDA see, is it equal to an agricultural product. Basically, dead leaves wrapped in paper. That's what they've decided to regulate us as. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to regulate us the same, but it was the framework they had to work with. So they spent some time churning and burning on how they could make this happen, and they popped out in May of last year with their final deeming rule. And so when you hear us, and hopefully you will talk to some of the business owners that are here before you go, when we talk about the deeming rule, that's the thing we're talking about. That's the thing where FDA made this equal under the law to dead leaves wrapped in paper, okay? So when the deeming rule came out, it had all these things, like if you want to stay in the market, jump through these hoops. Earlier I mentioned this idea of if you want butter to stay on the market, you have to do studies that take 8 years but do them in 2 years. That actually is in the FDA deeming rule for our products. So by 2018, if you have not managed to scrape up about $1 million per product, Vicki, how many products do you carry? Okay, so Vicki, who owns a chain of stores, Signat stores here in the area and in a couple other states, I believe, as well, she has 3,200 separate products as defined by the FDA under the deeming rules. Each of those 3,200 has to go separately through this approval process. Each of those applications, the FDA underestimated, we think drastically, would be about $300,000 per application. Times how many? 3,200. I don't even know what the math is on that. That's a lot. But here's the thing. People that have really looked into maybe actually doing this, have thought, this is like $1 million per product. This isn't 300,000. Are they crazy? The big issue, though, that makes it a non-starter, even if you're independently wealthy, you're a billionaire, and you have nothing else to do with your millions of dollars but apply for this impossible to get approval. The problem is, as I mentioned earlier, some of the studies they require can take about 8 years because you've got to put them, they're studying human behavior and things of this nature, and you can't study that in a short amount of time. So basically, we've got a leash on life till August of 2018 to make hay where the sun shines. And as we're seeing I run a trade association. So what we're seeing, we talk to our members about what they're seeing, and what we're hearing is that they really don't plan to sell their bodies, and they don't think they could get the millions they needed even if they did. So their business plan, can you believe this, in America, the business plan is to close. The discussions are, how can we close well? Now, why is an American company that's making a product that has solved a public health problem that for decades public health has tried to solve unsuccessfully. They're solving the problem. They're not costing taxpayers $1 to do it. In fact, they might be saving tax dollars money on the backside from all the health care costs of taking care of smokers. Why are they're not looking at 5-year plans. We did a survey, and I've got the numbers in here somewhere. You can ask me later because I clearly am not looking at my speech. We did a survey with an organization called e-cig Intelligence, and basically asked our members some questions. And I asked, can you put some questions in there you don't normally ask? Like, how has the FDA deeming rule affected your business planning? And what came back was not surprising. It was shocking only in the fervor with which the responses came. Something like 80% of our members that were surveyed have either stopped hiring, have already started closing, plan to close before they have to file in 2018. But there's this tiny percent, I think they might be crazy, but this tiny percent of people that thinks it's not going to affect their business. They're clearly not reading my emails. But what I don't understand is how that's okay. You know, and as I started this, I love the free market. I like government being small, so small it can't reach you. I just can't fathom. I've watched this industry shoot up to where it got big, and yeah, it got a little crazy. People were getting a little nutty. And then now it's just, it went from boom, and now it's on this gross spiral into bust. We've got to do something, and we need help from people that don't smoke, don't use the products, but do care about Americans and rights and freedoms and people who have smoked and will smoke and did smoke and died. And that's a hard thing to say, but if you know somebody who smoked and died of smoke-related disease, please get involved. Keep somebody else's loved one from going through what you did. Because it's not good, and it's not necessary. That's what's really disgusting. So there's things you can do as a business, and there's things you can do as a consumer. And because we have businesses and consumers in the room and online, I'm going to give you both. And this is, I am going to look at my notes because I won't remember it, and I'll get it wrong, and you'll take notes, and then you'll have it wrong. So we have hot off the presses, just as of today, the press release came out. So there's a multiple trade associations, there's all kinds of advocacy groups. You don't need to know all that. You just need to know that a coalition has formed out of desperation. We're going to stop hating each other and start working on hating the bad people in government, which is always nice. So here we go. If you are a consumer or a business, there is a coalition effort now out. And if you want to jot this down, it's the Stop the Vape Ban Coalition campaign. It was just officially launched yesterday. Although the website was up in a different form previously, they've now updated for all the current things I'm about to talk to you about. It's stopthevapeban.com. Stopthevapeban.com. So it's stopthevapeban.com. What you're going to find if you're a consumer is really easy. Just read, click, and send. It's going to ask you your address so it can go to the correct congressman. We're also doing efforts where we're trying to get Secretary Tom Price as the new Grand Poobah of HHS to just flex his muscles a bit and basically tell the FDA, yeah, we're not enforcing that. That sucks. We're going to fix that. Until we do, we're not enforcing it. So that's an ask we're making of Secretary Price. We're making an ask of your congressman to amend the law or put an amendment in your appropriations bill to amend the law. If you hear my voice sounding desperate, it's not just because I'm getting over laryngitis. It's actually because this is a very desperate time. And normally, I would be the government affairs person going, just pick one strategy. Like, this is ridiculous. But you know what? We're coming down to the end, aren't we? We're at Hail Mary, whatever works, works. And there are lawsuits battling this. They may not get a decision in time. But what's interesting is that I went to one of the hearings. There's this organization called Right to Be Smoke Free, which is also a coalition-funded organization that's suing the FDA and other governments that are bad. And They actually won against Indiana recently. That was kind of exciting. But they sued the FDA over all that I'm talking to you about today. And the judge at the federal court listened, and she was tough. You know, she asked hard questions. And then she looked at the DOJ lawyer who's representing the FDA, and she said, you kind of set this industry up to fail. And I thought that was telling that this woman, she knew nothing about vapor. Like, this case got dropped in her lap. But she's asking hard questions. Like, she's not necessarily being friendly towards our industry. She's asking us hard questions too. And when she looked at the timelines and the requirement to stay on the market, and then how much time they actually gave you to do that, it clicked for her. Well, you created a regulation that by nature is impossible to comply with, which means she didn't like us calling it a ban. But I don't know what you call it when your products are illegal to sell. What is that? That's a ban. That's why we called it stopthevapeban.com. So if you're a consumer, you can go there, and it's easy. You'll put in your address. You can send, and we really, really, really need you not just doing it yourselves, but if you could, you know, go on any little email list you have or social media and pass the word, fantastic. The PR firm that's put together these coalition efforts has done a fantastic job. It's something you can feel good about spreading around. It's all very accurate, very specific. The other thing is if you're a business owner, same spot you can go to. Now, you can join my trade association, and I'll send you stuff all the time and harass your inbox. But if you just want to go home and do something right now, and it's not laden with baggage of who are you friends with, you can just go in and spread this. And the great thing for businesses, they're also they have a spot now where you can download flyers and signs and things for your shops, so you can encourage your customers to engage as consumers as well. It's very well done. I think every company I know that I work with is involved and is doing this. So consumers, go to stopthevapeban.com. I also want to encourage you, if this is actually interesting to you and you're not just being polite today, link up with an organization that has been around for a long time working on tobacco harm reduction even before vapor. They were working on tobacco harm reduction as relates to smokeless tobacco. Smart people, dedicated people, almost all of them are volunteers. It's called CASA, which is not quite as bad of an acronym as my organization, SFATA, but it's kind of bad. So I'm not going to tell you what the words are because I'll get it wrong, but if you go to their website, which is casaa.org, put in your address and your email, and they will alert you when stupid things the government is doing in your area come up and tell you who you can call and what you can do. It's a really great organization. I've worked closely with them for a few years, and if you're a consumer, you really should be linked up with them. And they're doing their own programs aside from the Stop the Vape Ban effort, because they're really consumer targeted. So they might have interesting things there at their website that is dedicated to these same issues, which is called august8th.org. Now, anybody here know why it's called that? You're listening, yes. So yes, August 8th, 2018, the industry goes dark. We close the curtains unless we can fix this. So their website is named august8th.org. So if you're a consumer, it's a good place to go. Even a business, it's a decent place to go because you'll actually learn a lot just by reading their stuff. If you are an employer that has employees working in your shop, count up how many people you employ. A really great thing to do is to drop that in your congressman's lap, city councilman's lap. I employ 25 people in your district. I will be firing them and telling them you're the reason. You know, it's weird how so rarely do you get to connect your elected officials so closely with your real life, your everyday activity that you do, your paycheck. I mean, honestly, let's be honest. Those of us that used to smoke, we just smell better when we're near you. I mean, there's got to be some benefit that I just don't stink. So I'm going to close by just reminding you that this isn't just a small problem. There are millions of Americans who've made a healthier choice, a choice to save their own lives, but also to set a different precedent that the young people will watch. I mean, we actually could get rid of smoking in one generation if the government would just leave us the hell alone. Let the free market work. Thank you. I think that was a theme of another speech I gave on another topic once at the same organization. Anyway, we need your help to stop it. We appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be hanging around. And yay, my voice lasted the whole time. Thank you.
That was great, great, Pamela. I can't tell if you were just saving up your voice all this time for us, or that was about 5% voice from Pamela, so quite a whirlwind. Great. Now it's Q&A time. Actually, I've been watching the chat room on both YouTube and the Facebook page. Got a lot of fans out there. They really enjoyed the presentation so far. If you're in the room, so everybody watching online, I'm going to be watching the chat room. So now's your chance to get in some questions, and I'll read them to the panel, and they will answer them. If you have a question here in the room, please raise your hand, and a wonderful Heartland employee will come over to a microphone. Let them hold it in front of your face and do your talking. We'll start right over here with Larry.
Hi, I'm Larry Greenberg. I am not a smoker, but there have been smokers in my family. I'm just curious, is this purely bureaucratic excess on their own initiative? Is there the tobacco industry on this because they're losing market share? Are the municipalities driving this because they need sin tax revenue? And what does the Surgeon General have to say?
Okay. Yes to everything, except the part about the tobacco companies. I actually worked for Reynolds Tobacco back when I was a smoker, and these products were not in their product mix, but they were developing one. And they kind of didn't take them seriously when I worked there. It was kind of like, but then they started seeing, yes, their cigarette sales, which were already declining, started going faster. And they said, hey, we need to jump over into this product category. This is real. This might be the future. Because you got to understand, cigarette companies have been watching sales decline year over year for a couple decades now. So they've been looking for where do we go? Where do we take our shareholders' futures and put them, right? What do we do next? Well, they decided this is the next thing. In fact, I think both of the big companies put a ton of money into R&D and marketing materials and really put a ton of money into trying to grow this category within their companies. So they actually, strangely enough, even though they still sell cigarettes, obviously make quite a bit of money doing that, they're working very hard right alongside us little small business vapor folks to try to stop this problem as well, because they've put all this money and kind of got their heads around the idea this is the future for them as well. And now you see what's happening. So it's actually not tobacco attacking us. You asked about the Attorney General?
Surgeon General.
Surgeon General. Did you want to address the Surgeon General? Okay. So the Surgeon General, appointed by the last president, missed a tremendous opportunity in addressing these products in his report. And for all of you that think the Surgeon General is actually just a really smart doctor that's like the top doc, they're politicians, right? So what he did was he chose to focus only on this misconception that Dr. Radu covered, this gateway problem, right? If adults switch to these products, then kids are going to see that, and then they're going to use them. So we influence because they kind of like to do things that are not good and safe, right? But the Surgeon General decided that because, some child somewhere might someday try this, and that somehow is worse than them smoking. I don't really get that. That, we got to do something about this. And we were very saddened because the science really had come along to the point where it was kind of ridiculous to argue for the kind of things he did. And it was disappointing as an American to see my top doc taking that position publicly.
Go right back here, Jim Johnston.
Hi, this is Jim Johnston. I'm with Heartland from the beginning, by the way. The question that occurs to my mind as an economist is that a substantial portion of the population thinks that the benefits from smoking exceed the cost. Now, can you please tell me what are the benefits of smoking that are perceived by these substantial part of the population?
You pick up the microphone to respond, please.
Well, one of the philosophers said that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. I grew up in Appalachia in Ohio, and it was tough. And, you know, people didn't have money. They didn't have clothes for their kids come school time and such in my hometown. And it was a tough life. And, you know, alcohol and tobacco help you deal with that. It gives you a bit of pleasure. It elevates your mood when you're down, and it sort of tempers. If you tend to run high, it tempers you. If you're falling asleep, it wakes you up, and it has a lot of very positive reinforcing effects. Everybody in this country knows that smoking is a bad deal in the long run. But they're trading, as an economist, you know that you can trade short-term benefits for long-term risks. And people discount the long-term risks when they're achieving the short-term benefits. And I think that's what the issue is here.
Okay, we're going to take a question here online, then we're going to go here, and then we're going to go over there next. This is from Jake Jacobson in the chat room on YouTube. Hello, Jake. He says, one of the main talking points that Dr. Radu mentioned is the addictiveness of nicotine. Are there any studies that show nicotine addiction outside of tobacco, example NRT?
Well, when NRT was developed, the researchers tried to determine what level of nicotine, how quickly it was delivered, that would be the addictive point. And I don't think there's ever been any consensus about exactly how addictive nicotine is. But when it's delivered via cigarette smoke, inhalation, that seems to create a stronger dependence. And they've compared that. Actually, you can do some comparisons with other nicotine delivery forms, like smokeless tobacco, which doesn't deliver the same speed bolus that cigarette smoking does, but longer term, it's a sort of a more subtle, longer term effect. And e-cigarettes, they don't deliver the exact same kick that smoking does. So there's some people believe that those products are not as powerfully addictive or dependent. But it's this part of the tobacco issue is a bit on the fuzzy side. There are no concrete numbers like counting lung cancer. You know, once again, for those people who believe who are either unwilling or unable to live without tobacco products, the point is these new products are vastly safer.
Right over here.
Yeah, this is Dave Peerenboom. The new administration in Washington is, of course, trying to roll back some regulations, FDA being a logjam that's been well noted and for a long time. But it sounds to me like your deadline is not going to make it. So, but the question is, the development of these products, okay, this is the U.S., we're stuck with what we got. But other countries have a similar problem. I lived in England for a while, and they smoke very heavily. Went to China in business one time, and they chain smoke all the time. So they've got the same kind of problems. Do they have the same, or is the regulatory environment more favorable in some of those other developed countries such that the industry will continue to grow, and eventually maybe we'll straighten our problems out here, and then smokers would have benefit of the new products that are being produced around the world? And secondly, I mean, if so, are American manufacturers permitted to produce for export those products? That's all.
So the first part of the question was about President Trump and kind of his themes of reducing regulation and encouraging American manufacturing and small businesses and jobs. You may not realize it, but you also tied into another one, this idea of jobs leaving, the exporting of jobs leaving America. And one of the very unusual things I've stumbled upon is with some of our larger manufacturers. We have 1,100 different companies that are members, and they're small retail shops to big manufacturers. All of our companies by U.S. government standards would be considered small, but relative to us, we think they're very large. The larger ones within our small business stable are all looking at going to Europe. And the reason is the UK, as part of the EU, and I'll let Dr. Radu give details if you want more, they passed their own regulatory scheme, which I will tell you at the time it passed, everybody in our country was praising the Lord that they were an American, because those regulations in Europe were horrible, we thought. And oh, those poor people, how are they going to do? How are they going to stay in business? And then the FDA put our regs out. And it was a sad day to be an American manufacturer. So people have been looking at going over there. The UK has not just said, we're going to let you make these. They are actually recommending them through their public health systems to people that smoke. They're encouraging the use. They're not having to stretch the truth, you understand. Unlike our government, they're just telling the truth, what it is, what the science says, what you can expect, what you cannot expect from the products. Make them the way you say you make them, put in them what you say you put in them, and we'll let you sell them. Do you know that that is not a revolutionary idea, to just tell the truth? But that's what the UK is doing, and you saw Dr. Radu's presentation. Remember the bars? How the opinions and thoughts around these products in the UK are so much more positive. It's not just because they're British and they sound smart when they talk. It's actually because they're getting better information from their government and their press and their public health scientists that are able to look themselves in the mirror because they're telling the truth about these products.
You want to add to that? Right over here.
Hello, my name is Brian Foydick. I'm with the Reason Foundation. Wanted to ask Pamela and Dr. Radu each a quick question. Pamela, what specifically are you looking for action-wise in DC? And Dr. Radu, you've been involved in tobacco harm reduction for a very long time, starting with smokeless tobacco and snus in Sweden. Is the mood and environment in the scientific community different now than it was back when you started this war or started fighting it? And if so, how?
It's been difficult to convince the scientific community to go with the science on this. One of the reasons is when I give the kind of the medical lecture to physicians and other health professionals, they get it. There's no problem understanding this at an intellectual level that, you know, you burn something, you create toxins, and if you don't burn it, it's a lot safer. The problem becomes a problem when we go from individuals up to institutions, to medical societies, to county governments, to state governments, federal governments, and at the federal government level, they basically fund universities. They, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact billions of dollars every year, they give universities grants. And if the federal government has a policy that we will be a tobacco-free society, when you apply for a grant, you don't go counter to that. And back in 1994, I actually sent in a grant, or tried to send in a grant, that suggested an option for smokers for safer products. And it wasn't pretty. And so the message is that everybody stays in lockstep. And so it's difficult to convince other health professionals, others in academics, to seriously consider and act on these tobacco harm reduction ideas.
I'll answer my, oh, did you?
In 94, just because, in 94, what was your idea? I'm just curious.
My idea, and I published a paper, a scientific publication on this, was that smokers might consider, if they were unable or unwilling to quit, to switch to a smokeless tobacco product. A snus, well, at the time we weren't talking about snus, we were talking about regular chewing tobacco or small tea bags of tobacco that you could put in your lip pretty discreetly. That idea received such an incredible reaction from federal authorities that they basically criticized the university for having me on the faculty. I was literally threatened with my professional life. And that's been documented in a book by Jacob Solomon called For Your Own Good. It's a pretty interesting story. So, you know, I put my university at risk for getting other funding from the feds because of I had just this crazy idea that we might help smokers. So.
That's crazy. So my half of the question from Brian, I believe, was what specific things are we needing at the federal level? Basically, as we said, we're kind of doing a Hail Mary, here's the things that might work. So we're seeking congressmen to sign on as co-sponsors of a bill sponsored by, it's called the Cole-Bishop bill. It's H.R. 1136. It is a bill that, I don't want to go into too much detail, it actually adds some regulation that the FDA missed when they were busy shutting us down with this impractical application ban. They forgot to regulate us in a couple areas, so it adds on some regulations they missed. But it saves us by moving this date that I won't go into too much detail because it's complicated, but it moves this thing called the predicate date. So that our products get this at least as good a treatment as cigarettes got when they got their own predicate date that made sense when the bill was new, or when that law was new. So we're asking your congressman to sign on as co-sponsors to a bill that's a standalone bill. It's mostly symbolic because it's a sign of support for the concepts that are in the bill. And the reason is we also have an amendment, same bipartisan sponsorship, that is currently sitting in the House version of the Department of Agricultural funding bill. It was put on last session. We need that to stay in the final version of the omnibus budget bill. Because as you probably all know, because you're smart people and you care about public policy, that's why you're here, the likelihood of Congress passing a standalone bill on a somewhat controversial issue is probably not going to happen in our lifetime, definitely not going to happen according to our timelines. But by sponsoring it, it shows leadership that's got a lot of support, and maybe they keep it in the final budget. So support the Cole-Bishop amendment in the budget bill, sign on as a sponsor on the Cole-Bishop bill. Same sponsors, keeps it real simple, same content in both products. The other thing is if you know Trump, and you know it's possible people in this room do, please put this on his radar. As was pointed out very wisely over here, our issues line up right down the line with everything he talked about in his campaign and things he's talked about since he got in. We need to be on his list, but we need to get his attention. So if you know him, you know somebody who knows him, please help us get on Trump's radar. And I wouldn't put that into a speech anywhere but here, but I know that some of the Heartland people actually do have connections there. The other thing we're asking for is regulatory relief in the form, as I mentioned earlier, of having Secretary Price, just through edict as the head of HHS, just decide not to enforce these timelines and give us a chance to get better regulation in place before it puts us out of business. And then you can't really do anything about it except if you've got money laying around, is the lawsuits that are going on through Right to Be Smoke Free, which is trying to reel in government over-regulation through the court system.
Trump, if you're listening, there's a message here for you. I hope you'll see this video. Question right here.
So it was my understanding that since 2000, the states have been in the cigarette sales business since the '98 lawsuit through 2025. Is that, you guys didn't really mention it, is that still the case? Is it still in the state's best interest to sell more cigarettes?
I don't want to be a microphone hog, but I am a former politician, so. Yeah, so yes. 1998 Master Settlement Agreement, for those that aren't sure what he's referring to, tobacco companies, in order to avoid this never-ending stream of lawsuits, agreed to give millions and millions and millions of dollars every single year to all of the states except for 4 who were not part of it, this giant lawsuit, and that continues today. Interestingly, some of the not as smart states, this might be one, decided to monetize those revenue streams, and so now Wall Street needs us to keep selling cigarettes because they have non-secured bonds. Basically, if the state stops selling the state doesn't sell. The state stops getting the revenues from cigarette sales within their state. Wall Street basically can't come after us and take our highways and bridges as collateral, right? So Wall Street needs us to sell cigarettes.
So that's still a problem?
It's a problem. I, in my quiet moments, am just crass enough to say that might feed into the thinking in some of our state level decisions. I may or may not have been privy to conversations that were just that dark and awful to be witness to. But, you know, states do have to balance their budgets. And my excuse for your legislators is this: they didn't do that, right? That was money that the state got addicted to probably long before they got elected. Well, except in Illinois, you don't ever get rid of people here. But in most states, most people that are now in office were not there in 1998. It wasn't their decision to pay for schools and roads with people dying from cigarette purchases. But it is what it is, right? It's now there. It's a huge part of some people's budgets and funding important things. And it's something they actually have to consider whenever they think about what to do about this at the state level.
Dr. Radu, you may think you didn't respond, but a smile is a response. Right here.
Hello, I'm Nancy Thorner. It's just a general question. You said that teens were smoking less. However, you didn't mention too much about marijuana because, as we know, the FDA has considered and still claims and says that marijuana is a lethal drug. So it is a drug. And yet there's misconception out there. I know whenever I write about marijuana, I'm called a Nazi. I don't know what I'm talking about. And that marijuana isn't dangerous. Yet the potency of marijuana, at least I've been told, is 20 times more than today than it was back in 1970 when parents might have smoked it. And so this is a real big problem. And yet you're trying to get them to switch. But I think we have to, first of all, get to the public. And the public actually believes that marijuana is not dangerous. This is a big, big problem.
Come on, Pamela. You can do it.
You're supposed to end non-questions with, don't you agree? Because that turns everything. Yeah, I was just waiting for that. Just in case any of you have not been a politician and don't know how to do that, don't you agree? Actually, there is, as it relates to what you just said, I think there actually is a tie-in for what we're talking about is things need to be put in context. The poisonings are so far low on the level of things that are generally poisoning people more often. The dangers that our minors are getting into, if our products are dangerous for them, and I don't know that they are any more dangerous for them or not, I don't think it's leading to smoking. I think the numbers prove that, so I don't know. But look at that other, it's my imaginary display. Look at, like you said, the marijuana use. That's intoxicating. People are driving and riding their skateboards into walls and things. And then you've got alcohol, right? Like, alcohol is a mind-altering drug that you could die the first time you use it just because of the stupid stuff you do while you're using it. So I think when we're talking about nicotine, now we have to talk about it in real terms. And Dr. Radu knows so much about nicotine in the body. You could talk to him all night long. But put it in context. What really harms people? An addiction in and of itself is just a habit that you enjoy that you don't stop. But if the addiction kills you or harms people around you, it needs to be in a different category in our minds. And I put nicotine and caffeine in that it's kind of like a habit. I don't even try to stop because I like it, right? That's different than some of these other things that are addictive. And I think that's part of it. You have to look at marijuana use in context with how your behaviors could cause negative outcomes.
And to follow on what Pamela said, it's interesting. E-cigarettes give you the ability, if you're uncomfortable with nicotine, it gives you the ability to reduce nicotine to 0 levels. I've known smokers who have quit all nicotine products but still vape because they like the sensation, they like the throat hit from vaping. So what this does is puts tobacco users back in charge. And that's what's important about all of tobacco harm reduction.
We have time for a few more questions. One right back here.
So Diane Bass with the Heartland Institute, playing devil's advocate a little bit, it took a long time for us to recognize that smoking cigarettes is dangerous. And it took a while for people to admit that. E-cigarettes are new. Shouldn't we be a little bit careful about them until we really know how dangerous the product is?
That's a great question, Diane. And because cigarettes started to be used in large numbers at the turn of the 20th century. And it was 20 or 30 years before doctors started to detect potential problems. It takes a career of heavy smoking to start producing the cancers, the lung disease, the heart and stroke risks. It's not that they're not produced overnight. And so you ask, okay, so what about vapor? We don't know. We're just starting vapor. How can it be safer than smoke? Well, smoke delivers somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 chemicals at very high doses. It is a powerful group of chemicals. And to this day, we don't know which chemical in smoke causes which disease for sure. We know there are toxins there, but we don't have specifics. We still don't know that after decades and decades of research. But what we do know is that vapor has water, propylene glycol or glycerin, small amounts of flavor, nicotine, which we know, we have tons of experience that we know that's not detrimental in the long run. And that's about it. So just from the chemistry alone, there is no doubt that these products are vastly safer. Now, if you want me to put a number on it, I can't. But the Royal College of Physicians has given us a ballpark. And they're not only the most prestigious medical society in the world, they were the first to nail smoking back in like 1962. In fact, John Kennedy was asked about that Royal College of Physicians report in a press conference, and he got the Surgeon General going on our landmark report in 1964. So the Royal College has really always been at the forefront of tobacco and health effects. And they have clearly stated that the risks are probably in the 95% reduced range. It's not a specific, but it's very, very clear. And as both Pamela and I have said, with 480,000 people dying every year, I think we can have that level of uncertainty and still tell people they're better off.
We'll have one last question over here.
Okay, yeah, Dave Peerenboom again. Addiction versus habits. What's a habit and what's an addiction? Now, I'm not suggesting that can be answered here in this format, but I think it's kind of interesting. I'm always nervous when I hear addiction. Well, it's because I've known a number of people, including my own father, who was a habitual cigarette smoker, World War II, all that business, from the time he was 16. And yet, when he understood the risks that were becoming known in the early 60s, he quit cold turkey. Now, he had a habit, did he have an addiction? He never went back, he never smoked again. But I think the whole subject of that word in a scientific concept is a little squishy to me. I don't know. What do you think? Thank you.
I agree with you. The whole area of addiction is fraught with a lot of complexity, and it's not at all simple. We not only have different delivery systems, but we're genetically different, and the way our body metabolizes what we consume can also have a great effect on how we respond. So that your father was a big smoker, but then he was able to quit right away, whereas others who look to be almost exactly the same, they just can never put them away, or they do so and go back and forth over months and years. That may be a difference in their chemistry and the way their cells are managing that nicotine and the way they're reacting to it. So you're right. It's very, very complex.
Okay, thank you. Let's give our wonderful guests tonight a round of applause. Very informative discussion. Thank you both very much. And thank you very much for watching online. 1 week from tonight, March 22nd, we have another event featuring David Keene, the former head of the American Conservative Union, former head of the Washington Times, and of course former head of the NRA. And he's here to talk about his new book, Shall Not Be Infringed, The New Assaults on the Second Amendment. And of course, the Heartland Institute has our big climate conference, the 12th International Conference on Climate Change, next week, Thursday and Friday in Washington, D.C. And if you can't be there in person, it'll all be live streamed, just like everything we do here tonight. Thank you all for being here so much, and we hope to see you again soon. Oh, and fill out surveys, please. Fill out surveys that are on your tables.